Hi, everyone. Karen Roby, Scott Fulton here for ZDNet talking about 5G, 6G. If you're tired of 5G, don't worry. Engineers are coming up with plans and agendas for 6G, of course. And maybe it's for 2030, perhaps 2025. Lots of questions here about when this will all come to fruition. And 5G is expected to get even faster. Scott, lots of drama here.
Lots of drama here, Karen, and I don't know if it's pandemic blues finally being lifted and people wanting another great G in their lives or what it's all about. But yes, some telco operations and organizations have been hiring engineers for what they call 6G strategy. What 6G strategy is about is trying to figure out what 6G strategy should be about. In other words, what do we go to Washington with when we're asking for funding to help us with new infrastructure projects? And it's because 5G, well, it kind of seems a little old by now. I mean, you and I have been talking about it like the next generation for close to 3 years. And we started just the other day transitioning our language in ZDNet so we don't call 5G the next generation of telecommunications anymore. We're calling it the current generation, as it should be, because 5G phones are being sold. The other thing is, are people really experiencing all the great things that we talked about 2 and 3 years ago? And the question is still a little bit on the table. So what is 6G supposed to be? When engineers pitch the idea of 6G wireless, what is it really about 6G wireless that's over and above what 5G is? And the first thing we should be talking about is something called terahertz communication or terahertz frequencies. This is bandwidth that's way above gigahertz level, 1,000 times above that, into the frequencies that shouldn't even be possible, that we didn't think that antennas could possibly receive, and that were first being discussed 5 and 6 years ago as ways of seeing through walls and getting into what objects are behind the walls. If we beam a terahertz signal and beamed it back at us, would it tell us who's sitting in the room, if anybody? It's virtual radar. It's tricorder level stuff. Well, perhaps we could transmit at these kind of frequencies. And why would we want to? Because we could actually get we could actually get the physical layout of rooms from a terahertz frequency. Now, do people actually want that? I mean, that brings up the musical question. Do I want to look into your private residence and see whether you're home? I mean, do you really want telemarketers knowing that you're there before they call you? This is the kind of level stuff you're talking about when you get into terahertz. The other thing that 5G is about is low Earth orbit satellites. Imagine satellites that are geostationary but are low enough that when the sun goes down, you can actually see these things kind of floating around there, maybe giving a couple of blips, adding some stars to the constellation, but being little waypoints that you can bounce signals off of. This may be a way to get high frequency 5G signals into rural areas where you can't plow through and bring in a fiber optic cable. If you're in rural Wyoming, you're surrounded by rock, and you're not going to get a fiber optic cable to certain areas unless you lay it on top of the ground. And a low Earth orbit satellite might be able to solve that if you can plant something in the lesser than upper atmosphere, but something that's got just low enough amount of gravity to be able to stay roughly in place, that you can bounce a signal off of and get it to a base station in a rural area like Idaho or some places in my native Oklahoma. The other thing that we're talking about for 6G is so-called free space relays. These are optical relays between points that you could put on top of not just base station, but maybe water towers. Places where you can beam a line of sight and get a clear optical signal from point to point over a distance of 4 or 5 miles. That would save you having to plant even more optical cable, and this could help you get into a lot of rural areas. But what's being talked about in topics in symposiums like the 6G symposium that's happening this week virtually, well, folks are talking about all kinds of wild technology, including, and I'm not making this up, human neuron to artificial neuron connectivity, linking your brain to a neural network. And what kind of bandwidth would that require? And what kinds of game shows could you involve yourself in if you were a contestant on something like that? 4D holographic experiences. In other words, entertainment that you can see, touch, and I'm not kidding, smell. To generate the smell of a rose garden or what Congress actually smells like if you're watching them communicate. And talking about biofeedback sensors between all living things. Could we not only model the next coronavirus, but stick little antennas on it so that we could talk to it? This is stuff that is actually being discussed in one form or another as, okay, maybe we need bandwidth for that kind of thing. And I don't know whether any of that appeals to you. So let me go back, Karen, and ask you. Let me ask you this. When 5G was first being talked about, what was the thing on the promise of its big promises list that you most hoped to see?
Good question, Scott. I would say just faster speeds, lower latency. Those two things kind of go together. That's what we've been hearing so much about.
Okay, those are the two things. Was there anything on the number 3 list? Driving your car for you or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I guess so. Just more connectivity in that way. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. That promise is probably still attainable, but it might be attainable under 5G, under the current generation. A lot of the things that are talked about as big new kind of computing applications, they're possible with what are called edge computing systems, with faster processors that are shipped out to the edges of networks. And the way edge computing is being designed, you don't have to have biofeedback level connections for everything you need. You've just got fast computers that could produce a 4D image for you, but the image that it's based on could be sent over a standard terrestrial connection, something that doesn't have to be as ridiculously fast. You don't have to ship everything over the air. This isn't television. This isn't analog. We can be smart about things and put our smarts out to the edge. And this is the problem that 5G is currently solving. But there's a bigger problem that the telcos have to solve, and that's getting that bandwidth that you asked for, those faster connectivities that you wanted from the beginning. And in recent months, Verizon and AT&T both have plunked down a serious chunk of change in order to gain access to and keep T-Mobile from getting access to the C-band spectrum that the FCC has put up to add to the current 5G spectrum to help make things faster. And I wrote down the amount. AT&T is pledged to spend, get this, $27.4 billion, $23 billion of that this year. And Verizon, the big winner in the C-band auction, is planning to spend $53 billion on C-band spectrum to make things faster. Now, in what repercussions does that have? In order to make room, in order to have the funds necessary to do that, well, Verizon led the pack by starting to sell off some of its assets. It sold off its media assets a couple of months ago, AOL and Yahoo. Remember when that was going to be called Oath, that whole operation? Well, they're getting rid of their media assets. They already got rid of some of the data center assets that they've been owning to be able to concentrate on getting faster signals and getting that C-band spectrum that they need. And what did AT&T do? Well, you've heard of the tail wagging the dog. It's amazing how in this instance, you got somebody else's tail wagging AT&T's dog here, and AT&T followed up by selling off its media assets. It's spinning off Warner Media, the big chunk of change that it spent to get those huge media assets that enabled it to run HBO Max and a streaming thing. Well, it's spinning that off. It's retaining an interest in that, but the other interest will be invested in by Discovery Communications. So that makes Discovery, in essence, or the business that comes out of Discovery, the eventual owner in 2022 of Warner Media. And that's all because of 5G. It's because of telco's interest in getting the faster communication that we'd all been asking for. Which brings up the question: once AT&T's venture succeeds, let's not talk about failure here. What if they make this work? What if they make faster 5G that we'd all been hoping for, that you were hoping for? Will they want to do a 6G? When they finally get 5G running the way we wanted, the way we expected, are they really going to try to plunk down, billions of dollars more to launch low Earth orbit satellites? I think there's a big question mark in front of that, which is leading to my question for this next few series for ZDNet. Will there be a 6G? Maybe there doesn't need to be a 6G, just as there doesn't need to be a Windows 11 or Windows 12. Maybe we're tired of new versions, and maybe our 6G strategy should be redirected toward 5G.
Lots of good questions and things here to ponder, Scott. Well, for much more on 5G, 6G, everything you need to know, make sure you check it out on ZDNet. Thanks for watching.